This is a station identification moment. You're listening to CPR Worldwide Media, a division of CPR Media Network, coming to you live right across the planet. Check out our website at www.cprworldwidemedia.com and our Facebook page at facebook.com/CPR Worldwide Media. This is CPR Media Network, coming to you live from the USA.
Well, looky here, a new listener. Hey, this ain't your little sister's radio station.
Citigold is an account from a global bank with over 200 years experience, offering international banking expertise across over 100 markets. Your dedicated investment consultant adds a unique personal touch to your banking experience. Complimentary lifestyle offers like Marhaba service and free global money transfers help you save on time and money. At the core of Citigold is your dedicated relationship manager, personally looking after your financial needs. Be it lifestyle privileges like golf, lounge access across the Middle East, or worldwide privileges, Citigold provides you with a rewarding experience. One card is all you need for all your Citibank accounts. As a Citigold client, you benefit from our international expertise and global reach. Citigold is more than an account. It's a personal banking service offering exceptional privileges, customer service and recognition worldwide. So wherever you are, Citigold will be with you.
It's not about how many miles you can get out of the C-Max hybrid. It's about how much life you can fit into it. The Ford C-Max Hybrid, with an EPA estimated range of 540 miles on a tank of gas, and all the room you need to enjoy the trip. Go stretch out. Go further.
The Ouija board has existed for centuries. It is used to communicate with the dead.
If there's a presence here, please make yourself known. This is a joke. Oh my God. It's not even real, okay? It's just a game.
Ouija.
We're saying goodbye!
Rated PG-13.
Come on, Harry!
Dumb and Dumber 2 is the #1 movie in America.
Am I right? What?
Seriously, it's #1.
These guys are morons! I like her a lot.
Dumb and Dumber 2, rated PG-13. Now playing.
Read something recently worth thinking about. It's the soldier, not the campus organizer, who's given us freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier, not the reporter, who's given us freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who's given us freedom of speech. It's the soldier who serves under the flag, who defends the protesters' right to burn the flag. Isn't it time now to demonstrate that we support our troops? Were it not for the brave, there'd be no land of the free.
Fred Thompson's message was brought to you by citizensunited.org.
Welcome to the State Legislators Roundtable. Your host will be Charles Kacprowicz, Executive Director of Citizen Initiatives and Countermand Amendment. Our special legislator guests will be discussing important issues in their states that relate to federal encroachment on states' rights. The nonpartisan Article 5 single-issue Countermand Amendment can remedy many states' issues peacefully without the consent of Congress, the courts, or the executive branch. We will reclaim our constitutional republic soon. The nonpartisan Countermand Amendment is the missing piece of the Article 5 puzzle. Our nation is coming apart at the seams. So, we are countermanding.
Daniel Webster lived from 1782 until 1852. He wanted to see the Union preserved and Civil War averted. He worked for he worked for compromises to stave off the sectionalism that threatened war between the North and the South. Webster tried and failed 3 times to become President of the United States. In 1957, a Senate committee selected Webster as one of the 5 greatest U.S. senators, along with Henry Clay, John Calhoun, Robert La Follette, and Robert Taft. Daniel Webster said the following: "The moral principles and precepts contained in the scriptures ought to form the basis of our civil constitutions and laws. All the miseries and evils which men suffer from vice, crime, ambition, injustice, oppression, slavery, and war proceed from their despising or neglecting the precepts contained in the Bible." Welcome, folks, to the State Legislators Roundtable. I am Charles Kacprowicz, Director of Citizen Initiatives and the Countermand Amendment. Roundtable discussions with state legislators and community leaders center around critical issues in the states as they relate to federal encroachment on states' rights and how the nonpartisan Countermand Amendment can remedy many of them safely and quickly. This is not a gotcha forum. We are here not to back our guests into a corner. We encourage serious discussions of issues important to our guests and their states. Subjects can include taxation, criminal law, energy policies, health care, social issues, federal land grabs, court decisions, education, executive orders, unfunded liabilities, EPA, BLM, IRS, and more. You will learn how to protect your enumerated rights in the Constitution and how the states and their citizens can identify, define, and protect their unenumerated rights in the 9th and 10th Amendments peacefully and permanently. Roundtable members tonight are Sandy Toth, Executive Coordinator and Georgia State Director, Mike Coons, National Director and Alaska State Director, and Kelly Gordon, National Coordinator, Texas State Director, and our producer. We now have 15 sponsored states for the nonpartisan Article 5 Countermand Amendment. We could have a total of 20 sponsored states for the amendment in 30 days. We have had the honor of meeting many of the country's leading legislators and special guests, leaders in their fields, and even hosts that have their own shows. I see these state legislators more as statesmen than politicians. They are trying to find solutions to the many problems their citizens face, especially as they relate to encroachment by the federal government. The Roundtable has been growing, and I believe we are now one of the fastest growing talk shows on the internet. To learn more about the Countermand Amendment, go to countermands.us. Also, call your friends, relatives, and associates. Tell them to tune in to this show tonight at cprworldwidemedia.com/live-radio. They will also be able to participate in our online chat at that same address. Our roundtable can also be heard at PNN Talk Radio on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Tonight we have a very special guest, the host of the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot show. Her name is V. Wright, and also Jose Estevez. Their show airs at 7 to 9 p.m. Mondays through Fridays right here on cprworldwidemedia.com. V. Wright and Jose Estevez have a powerful, penetrating talk show that focuses on bringing to you the news that the media won't talk about, with hard-hitting facts and events that will help you to see who we really are as Americans, where we came from, and where we are going. They are constitutionalists who work tirelessly to preserve our constitutional heritage, states' rights, and personal freedoms. And right now, I would like to invite V. Wright and Jose to come on board and to begin sharing the things that they want to tell our audience about tonight. V, how are you this evening?
I am fine, Charles. Thank you very much for inviting us here today.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And I'm hoping that I gave a proper introduction for you. I'm not sure that I included everything I should have, but I tried to include as much as I could see as important for what you guys are trying to do.
Well, it was more than complimentary. I appreciate it very much. I found it to be very nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, V. Jose, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am here, and thanks for having me on your show. Big fan of yours, and I don't know what I can add tonight, but thank you for having me on your show, regardless.
Well, the fact that you respond so well makes me humble also. And I realize that, you extend to me a great deal of respect and honor that I don't feel quite qualified for. But I do appreciate the fact that you think well of me. That means a lot. Now, V, I would like you to tell us the things that are important to you. What is it that you really feel you want to get across to the audience tonight?
Oh, goodness. Would that be in relations to potentials for Countermand?
It could be, or any issue that relate to states would be helpful, but you may want to go in a different direction. We may find a way to connect it with the Countermand Amendment, but at this point, I just want you to feel the freedom to share about yourself, your show, what it is you're trying to do, the vision you have, and the kind of responses you're getting from your audience.
Well, I think when it comes to my show, or not my show, of course, I co-host that with Jose, and it is our show. It's WTF, the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot Show. I think the ultimate plan when we were considering the development of this show was to bring forward today's headlines, news and information in politics, government, and culture, without the confines of being strangle-held that you would find in a terrestrial station or in a terrestrial news outlet. But we wanted to do so with a personality that allowed for our commentary, our somewhat comedic style at times. I think both Jose and I both agree that sometimes you have to laugh, because if you don't, this mess will drive you crazy.
I agree with that 100%. Sometimes it's hard to laugh, let me tell you, especially when you're nervous. So the fact is, getting across a nice humorous response in your presentations is not always easy, but it is important, and I agree completely with what you just said.
Jose, would you like to expand upon that?
Well, I'm just frankly blessed that V took me into this thing, not knowing, knowing me, but not knowing I've never done anything like this. I mean, she had some career in broadcasting and some experience. I had none. However, I've got a passion for this country that comes from way deep down below. I grew up in a third world dictatorship. Came back to America in the 80s and at the height of the Reagan years, where the Red Threat was a very real threat, and growing up with movies like Red Dawn. And that may sound trite to some people, but it's not, because that's what we lived in right then. The Soviet Union hadn't quite been beaten by the Afghanis yet. They were still a very imposing, they had all the nukes pointed at us. We had all the nukes pointed at them. Reagan was just an amazing person. And so that's what I came back to after so many years of being out of the country. But just a genuine love of the country. So when V invited me to do this, I think we're making a real go of it. But a couple things that I wanted to bring up that just were in the news today. $18 trillion in debt. We just topped that milestone, up 70% under Obama. Of course, I'm sure it's all Bush's fault. And this other thing that's going on in Ferguson, which they're trying to spread throughout the country, I don't think it's going to be successful. But now their big thing is hands up, don't shoot. And I'm telling you what, I posted on Facebook today, and this is very poignant, very simple. If only the soon-to-be aborted fetuses could raise their little hands. This country, I just never have seen anything like it. The value of life. It reminds me of growing up in a third world country where life had no value.
I agree.
And I'm telling you, what I see here happening, and of course it's always somebody else's fault. He can never take responsibility for anything. And I joke around, but not really, that he has pigmentation immunity. People are afraid of him because of his color. They are afraid to go against him because they're going to be called racist or whatever other words they want to throw out.
Yes.
So everybody's afraid of the guy. And I'm telling you what, you've got one branch of the country out of three that's running everything. Everybody else is kind of cowed to him. And it's scary, really. It is. I've got young kids, Charles. They're 9 and 14. What are they going to grow up into? I don't know, to be honest with you.
It's a cesspool. I agree. You know, there are three things that I want to address, two of which you just mentioned. And I think I will before I address the third. The first, when you were talking about the Cold War, it is nearly impossible for me to get across to this generation how important the Cold War was. Now, I was in the Cold War. And yes, we were not in the Vietnam War, though we had been in the very early period of that conflagration. But I was on the East Coast on a destroyer. All the time we were at sea, guess what we did, Jose? We chased communist, Soviet, Russian submarines up and down the coast to get them off our coast because they were positioning themselves to not only steal communications and intelligence from us, but for a potential attack that they could exercise against our nation. The other thing we chased were Russian trawlers, constantly up and down the coast because they were monitoring every signal we sent up into the airwaves. And we had some boarding parties and so forth to get them off. That Cold War was a place of great jeopardy. And then when you consider the possible conflagration that would take place with nuclear war, it was a serious time, in many ways more serious than we have today. And then when we went further going into Vietnam, in spite of what the left and the Democrats have done to mar our history, the reason for Vietnam was because of the domino effect. And that was the idea that we had to stop communism. You see, and of course, the left, under the instigation of the Marxists who were instigating in the colleges, they decided that that wasn't a war even to be considered, and we lost 38,000 of our young men in that war and literally wasted their lives. Now, I'm going to read to you a few things. Communist officials have long understood the need to reach the youth of a nation in order to bring about a social revolution. This is done through rewriting of textbook curricula, focusing particularly upon history, in order to redirect impressionable young minds. In Hitler's Germany, it was Jungend, Jugend, which means Youth Government Organization. In Romania, it was the Government Youth League. In Hungary, it was the Hungarian Association of Communist Youth. The results were identical, millions who embraced a false ideology. I quoted a wonderful lady by the name of Catherine Millard, who wrote a wonderful book called Great American Statesmen and Heroes. I bought that book 20 years ago, and I still use it today. And she is just one of my heroines. I really love this lady. Now, Ronald Reagan said what? We are in the battle for the minds and souls of men. Why is it that our generation doesn't understand that? And then, before we get back to you, I want to give you some statistics. And it's interesting that you should be addressing the issues in the Cold War, because I had some of that material right in front of me that I was prepared to talk about tonight. The 20th century has been the most barbaric and evil century in human history. Now, I'm trying to get across to the audience how serious and egregious the century was in light of who we are today and what we need to do to stop this kind of brainwashing that has cost the lives of so many people. There were 170 million people who were murdered by their own governments from 1970 until 1987. 170 million. There were
in 17 years.
No, from 1917 to 1987.
Oh, okay.
That's about 70 years. And here's some facts. 60 million people died in nation-state civil wars around the world. 60 million. 62 million were murdered by communist Soviet Union, most of whom were murdered by Stalin. 40 million were murdered in communist China. 16 million Jews, Slavs, Serbs, Czechs, Poles, Ukrainians, and others were unfit to live in Nazi Germany. There were numbers and quotes that I took from Rudolf J. Rummel, who was a professor of political science at the University of Hawaii, in his book, Death by Government. The atrocities that took place were indescribable. They were unfathomable. But here's one that's even worse. A far greater unconscionable evil occurred since the 50s, that is the 1950s, when governments began legalizing the practice of abortion. Again, Jose, you led me right into this with your comments. 50 plus million American unborn babies were murdered in the womb, which the Supreme Court sanctioned in 1973. But worse than that, worldwide, it is now estimated that 700 million to 1 billion unborn babies were murdered in the womb in the nations of the world. The governments of the world are responsible for more deaths of innocent citizens and unborn than any other source, by far. We have to realize what we are up against. And what you are trying to do, what we are trying to do, especially with the Countermand, is to get people to realize how serious of a battle we are in, and we need to confront it. We need to address the issues in such a way where we push them back. It'll never get easy, but it has to be done by somebody. Jose,
you're absolutely correct. You are absolutely correct, Charles. Next Tuesday, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Charles, but next Tuesday we have Larry Schweikert on our show. He's coming as a guest, and we were talking about how we got in this mess, and you were talking about how these communists target our youth. And one of the books that he wrote was 48 Liberal Lies about American history that is taught to our children.
I know, and we must stop that. We must stop it.
But we have many situations abound. I mean, our government has spiraled completely out of control. We have a usurper in the White House that believes that he reigns with his mighty pen. We have a defunct Senate and Congress that are willing to turncoat and follow behind him at every corner for a pittance. We have the likes of John Kerry going and signing away our gun control rights via the UN. And people say, well, that doesn't count. But folks, they're testing the waters with a legal challenge right now versus the UN. So if that floats, so will this. We have many issues in this country. We have government overreach out of control. We have the indoctrination of our children through Common Core, through lies in our textbooks. We have the daily assassination of children untold. We have race relations at an all-time low when, in 2008, pretty much most of us had dismissed that there was a racial problem remaining in this country.
Understood. We can add to that Islam. The fact is that the Turkish leaders in Islam, I forget how to pronounce his name, Egador, I believe, but at any rate, they have announced that Islam discovered that the world was round in 1200.
Well, that's interesting, considering just 2 weeks ago I heard one of their imams say that it is blasphemy, basically, for anyone to say anything other than that the globe is flat.
I think they're trying to cover their tracks. That's what they're doing. But even with this, we can, again, being a Christian and loving the Word of God, Job in 3500 BC had addressed a spherical entity that was hanging or suspended in the heavens. And it was just in a place where it rotated and objects were rotating around it. And then, of course, we had Isaiah, who said that the earth was a circle. and that was in about 2700 BC. So I'm afraid these people who are trying to, and Muslims who are trying to rewrite history and rewrite the books that are important to us to learn truth, they are not only off target, they are propagandists rather than seekers of knowledge.
Jose?
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, I'm just sitting here thinking about that, and then I've got this thing right in front of me. Pope Francis, talking about Islam, just this Sunday, said that equating Islam with violence is wrong, even though his predecessor, Benedict, I think it was 16, caused storms of protests throughout the Islamic world in 2006 when he made a speech that suggested that Islam espoused violence. But the thing is, we don't reach these kids, and I think I'm figuring out what it is, and it's not simply one thing. But one thing I'm thinking of is the Twitterization. Oh boy, there I just created a new word. Twitterization of everything. These kids have to have it condensed in like 140 characters or less. It has to be very slickly packaged. They don't read in depth, and of course it's a generalization. But I'm saying overall, the way they're programmed is, they have to get it right now. I mean, you even see that on TV shows. Clips are very brief, where we used to have long, drawn-out scenes and stuff like that. Now it's very quick and very fast-paced, and they have to get it right now. And I think that can be used by people that are very slick with this. And I don't think they go in depth to study these things and to really truly learn about things like we used to do when we were in school, reading and stuff. It's very much different now. And of course, I do believe that this whole Common Core is right at that, to change all this stuff around. And,
yes.
I mean, we see it in the textbooks, these yes. states are fighting it. I mean, but once again, there's so many things, and I don't want to do too many generalizations, but I think we've got to learn how to reach these kids on the level that they're acclimated to now, which is totally different than even, I would say, 15, 20 years ago, the advent of the internet when it really came into being, and not even that long, to be honest with you, the late 90s, early 2000s, when it really became into being. And it's just grown by leaps and bounds so quickly. But yet the people that we're up against, the commies, the Marxists, the leftists, whatever you want to call them, I call them all of the above, they're learning. I think they're kind of controlling it, to be honest with you. I think they've taken the long view from the 50s and 60s. We had that senator back in the 50s talking about the communist threat, and everybody, boy, they laughed him right out of the halls of Congress. He was kind of right, just like Joe Wilson was when he said, "You lie to Obama," at the first State of the Union address. And look at how he was excoriated for that. But he was right.
Exactly.
Yes, he was indeed. The trick that they use on the left, and Islam is doing it right now, and that is denial. It's the idea that if you state a truth, that all they have to do is deny that it's true and demand that you address it and explain to them why it's the truth. All of a sudden, you're no longer defending the truth, you're defending a lie. You're forced into a situation where you are trying to explain why what they deny as truth is really the truth. And it goes on. I have people in the dialogues I have with them on the internet and elsewhere, Facebook especially, who have these long dissertations as to why I'm a jerk. And in that presentation or accusation that he makes, or they make, it's always with the idea that, what do you mean? You don't know what you're talking about. There's no such thing as a single issue amendment convention. Now, some of these people I've taken a fair amount of time with to explain the reasonings that I've used to come to the conclusions that I have. And then they yet come back to me with the same arguments. And so recently I said to one who is a relatively well-educated man, I said, look, I'm not going to go over the same track a second time. I said, you've been given my time, you've been given my explanations, and if in fact you don't accept them, I have no interest in talking further with you. I have to go on to somebody else because there are people out there who will listen, and they're the ones that will help us get things turned around.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Now, when I'm looking at issues, there are many, many, many issues that I think we have. Kelly, are we close now? I'm kind of interjecting here, but okay.
Short station break. We'll be right back.
Okay.
This is a station identification moment. You're listening to CPR Worldwide Media, a division of CPR Media Network, coming to you live right across the planet.
I believe that every single one of us has what it takes
to win back-to-back gold.
Ski faster than any other human.
I believe it's possible to overcome fear.
I believe
it's possible to destroy stereotypes.
To start over, to be the toughest,
the strongest,
the bravest in the world. And when we work together, we can make it all possible. That's why Citi has donated $500,000 to its Every Step of the Way program, an initiative created to help future athletes reach their full potential through sport programs that inspire us. Like figure skating in Harlem.
Like youth enrichment services. Like Team for Tomorrow.
The Team USA Stay on the Slopes initiative. Now spread the word and help decide how much of that money goes toward
offering personal support and financial assistance to Olympians in need.
Promoting the growth of hockey in the U.S.
Expanding the sport of luge into new regions.
Support for wounded service members. Join Team Citi and let's turn a world of potential into reality.
Go to citi.com/everystep and help decide where the money goes.
The Ouija board has existed for centuries. It is used to communicate with the dead.
If there's a presence here, please make yourself known. This is a joke. Oh my God. It's not even real, okay?
Ouija.
We're saying goodbye!
Rated PG-13.
Come on, Harry! Dumb and Dumber 2 is the #1 movie in America.
Am I right? What?
Seriously, it's #1.
These guys are morons! I like her a lot.
Dumb and Dumber 2, rated PG-13. Now playing.
Read something recently worth thinking about. It's the soldier, not the campus organizer, who's given us freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier, not the reporter, who's given us freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who's given us freedom of speech. It's the soldier who serves under the flag, who defends the protesters' right to burn the flag. Isn't it time now to demonstrate that we support our troops? Were it not for the brave, there'd be no land of the free.
Fred Thompson's message was brought to you by citizensunited.org.
Welcome back, folks. This is Charles Kacprowicz, Executive Director for Citizen Initiatives and the Countermand Amendment. We tonight have a very special, well, actually two very special guests, V. Wright and Jose Estevez from the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot Show. I'll get that straight yet. Right here on CPR. And we're delighted to have both of them. They are articulate, they're knowledgeable, they understand the issues that we have to deal with today, and they are constitutionalists. So I want to get to them right away. And in the meantime, I want Mike Coons, our national director out of Alaska, to come in and share some issues that he wants to talk about with regard to communism.
Yeah, you guys were talking about, Jose, you were in a third world country. I came in the Air Force in 1971, and my first tour of duty was in Turkey, which one of the more memorable places I ever been was on the Orient Express going through Romania. And if that isn't enough to scare the living daylights out of anybody, just try and take that trip back during that time frame. That'll put the fear of God into you. And when I got home, like a lot of Americans, when I got back, as much as I despise New York City, I bent down and kissed that New York concrete. But we were talking about the kids and stuff like that and communism. I had the opportunity outside of the Air Force. When I got out, I became a full-time paramedic. And I was working over in Western Russia in a town called Komsomolsk, which means communist city. It was built by Stalin through slave labor. And what they did was they brought the slave labor in from Moscow and the Balkans, and then the kids were taught to be good little communists and turn mommy and daddy in. And then they had kids, and then their kids turn their mommy and daddy in, and then right on down the line, so that the hammer and the sickle was still all the lamps going up and down the streets. And this was 1998, I want to say 1999, and this was when Yeltsin was in. And I got the chance to go to the schools, and I got a chance to go meet these kids. And one of the things, the Cold War, those kids are taught about the Cold War. Trust me, they know probably more about the Cold War than our kids, combined. And one of the things that was asked of me was, why did Americans love Gorbachev? And I said, well, the deal is that for all these decades upon decades, going back to Stalin, we had mutual assured, what do they call it? MAD, mutual assured death by nuclear device. And now with Gorbachev, all of a sudden these missiles weren't pointed at us, so the American people we loved them, but then I asked them, I said, what do you think of Bill Clinton? And because they didn't like Gorbachev at all. And of course they loved Bill Clinton, and they couldn't understand why I despised him, because Bill was doing everything to put us into a communist party, becoming a communist state, whereas the Gorbachev had done everything to get rid of communism. So, but the last thing I want to touch about on the kids is I came back, and the kids in Russia, these kids were like sponges, and they wanted information. They wanted to reach out. And so I went back to Palmer, and I went to Palmer Junior Middle School, went to the 8th grade, and I had a chance to talk to the kids there, told them what I'd seen over there with the Russian children, and then the Russian children wanted to talk to to relate, to send letters back and forth. Here's what I found. By the most snotty, self-centered, egotistical bunch of kids I have ever seen in my life. The questions were pretty much the same, based on total ignorance, whereas the Russian kids asked questions of ignorance respectfully. These kids would ask these same questions in a very derogatory manner and nose stuck up in the air, and sadly, not a single letter went over to those Russian kids. An opportunity missed, something terrible. So, it isn't just Common Core. It isn't just individual things. This is a cultural thing that we've just been going down the tubes on, and I don't know how to stop it. I pray that we do, because if we don't...
I have an answer I think that may be helpful, but maybe V or Jose want to address that.
V?
Well, I know that I fully support all that you're doing, Charles. You have been a diligent soldier in attempting to reign in this country and restore the republic to its former glory. And I stand behind what you're doing. I think it is the best shot without bloodshed that there is. We have to get state legislators on board, of course, in so much as that we have to return almost everything back to the individual states. They have to demand their rights. Now, I understand that there's going to be a few who don't, but we only need 36 that say, you know what, my people matter. What this country stood for matters. The UN and empirical government is not what we signed up for. And we're going to rein it back in and keep the federal government at the distance it was intended to be kept.
Yes, well, it is the focus of what we're trying to do here at Citizen Initiatives and the Countermand Amendment. Jose, I had a couple of minutes I'm going to take, but before I do, I'll give you an opportunity to respond.
Well, yeah. I don't know where to begin. Growing up overseas was very different than, growing up in America. In fact, there was a huge culture shock when we came back after the 6 years that we were there. And I found too, and I continue to find in the work that I currently do, which is working very intensively with kids, is that we have a generation, and I don't know when it changed, but that is so self-absorbed. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to end up. And I think these things like all the social media that they're involved with and stuff really does not help as far as that goes. But, we take too much. But all in all, though, in America, we take too much for granted. I mean, for the 6 years we were over there, we had to treat every gallon of water with 8 drops of Clorox. Doesn't sound like a big thing, but you can taste 8 drops of Clorox in water, but you do it to keep your health, much less, hopefully not dying from it. I mean, it could be that bad. But we take so much for granted in this country. But our goal when we were overseas too was always to help them improve their own country, because they would come to my dad all the time and say, sign for a visa for me to go to America. My dad said, you're not gonna like America. It's very fast paced, very much different than what you're used to. But he said, I would rather help you here. You help your own people. If you want to go over for a visit or to improve yourself, maybe that's different. But just to go over, he said, America's got lots of problems too. People don't understand that there's warts in America too, even though we love the country to death. But, help the people help themselves. So I guess that's what we've got to do in America too, is kind of concentrate on helping ourselves. I don't know if I'm an isolationist, go that far. But, V and I, one of our big things is veterans and the plight of homeless veterans and all those that are suffering from PTSD. It's the shame of America that we don't help them, that we have that problem here to begin with in America at the extent that it exists and the amount of people that exist, that we're not helping them. I don't know if I'm rambling, but there's just so many things.
And yet we will bring in, on the low end, 4.5 million invaders, and that's what I classify them as.
I do too.
And into this country, and we will provide for all of their care and needs. It is disgusting.
It's a shame. I agree. It's a crime. It's tragedy. It's treasonous. And they do it to get votes. That's what breaks my heart. I just think about the motivation of the Democrats and Obama is to get votes.
Well, I mean, Charles, I would like to say that it's just Obama and the Democrats. I would really, really love to say that. How our political system is severely broken. And when it became broken, it's been broken for about 50 or 60 years. We ran around for at least 60 years, throwing Band-Aids on it and praying that it would get better, hoping for the next.
I think that's a good analogy. I just got a note here from our producer. I'm going to read it to you. It's a good note that both of you will want to hear, and the audience. Mm-hmm. Lily Tang Wiggins, a mother of 3, testified before the Colorado State Board of Education that Common Core was similar to the education she received growing up in Mao's communist China. I came to this country for freedom, and I cannot believe this is happening all over again in this country. She said in the meeting, I don't know what happened to America, the shining city on a hill for freedom. I tell you, that's how serious it is. And here's a woman who knows the difference between the two and recognizes that we are not who she thought when she first came here.
Yeah.
I'm going to read to you some, and I guess before I read to you what Jefferson said, I want to make a comment about how we got into this mess. I blame the leaders in the church. I blame the preachers, the denominational leaders, and the parachurch leaders. Why? Because they thought the only thing they were required to do was to preach the gospel of salvation. And so they, every week, if you go to any Protestant evangelical church, they will focus almost 99% of the time on how one comes to know Jesus Christ. But you see, the gospel is a two-sided coin. The one side is going into all the world and teaching preaching the gospel to every creature. But then in verse 20, in Matthew 28, you have the second side, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, that's the rest of the Bible. That's the the gospel of righteousness. That's the gospel that says, how do you get a good constitution? How do you protect your constitution? That's the gospel that says, how do you use Article 5? That's the gospel that says, how do you become a good, righteous politician or judge or business? That's the gospel that we don't teach. And so as a result of 2 generations of young people who didn't get that teaching, we live in the aftermath, and we live, in my understanding, we live at a point in our history where most of the good, righteous teaching that was part of us back in the days when this Constitution was formed has been pushed aside, if not completely lost. Now, Jefferson said in the Kentucky Resolution, resolved that the several states composing the United States of America are not united on the principle of unlimited submission to their general government, that's the federal government, but that by compact, under the style and title of a Constitution for the United States and of amendments thereto, they constitute a general government for special purposes, delegated to that government certain definite powers, reserving each state to itself the residuary mass of right to their own self-government, and that whenever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. That to this compact, each state acceding as a state and is an integral party, its co-states forming as to itself the other party, and he goes on in more detail, but the point is, Mr. Jefferson knew states' rights, and he understood the need for the federal government to have limited powers. And that's part of what we are missing today because our government has gotten too big.
Well, it's not just the churches, Charles. It's society at large. People have moved away from the church. You know, what people don't realize is Christianity is the global largest religion. However, we are not the practicing religion. We have made so many concessions within the church and so many concessions within our moral fortitude that now Islam is the most practiced religion in the world. And we've got more Christians, but do we really? I mean, you can say you're a Christian, but if you're not a practicing Christian, are you truly a Christian? And I get the question all the time is, how can you be a Christian? Because, sometimes I don't have such finesse with my vocabulary, and I don't have much finesse with my attitude and disposition. I can say this: man's not going to tell me what's wrong with me. And I believe in a merciful God, and I believe that I will be much more forgiven for anything I may say that offends or in a manner that hurts someone's feelings or offends them than I would be for being dishonest.
Well, I'll add some thoughts to that, V. One, there are different levels of Christian teaching. And the idea of salvation and forgiveness and so forth is one level. But then there's the level of conviction. There's the level of doctrine. That's the place where certain instructions should be followed by Christian people. Now, when I was growing up in the 40s and 50s, I was born in 41, the nation was known as a Christian nation. As a matter of fact, just a few decades before, the U.S. Supreme Court made the declaration in the Trinity Church versus the United States that we are a Christian nation. They made that declaration. But what happened was not everybody had the same beliefs. Not everybody understood salvation in the same ways. There were Catholics, there were Protestants, there were independent groups. But what we all did have in a very common way, I would say 95% of the nation, we were a God-fearing people. There was a morality about Christian truths that we honored. I remember I used to be a teacher and preacher at a prison, or actually it was a county jail in Ohio. And I would walk into that prison area, and the prisoners would gather around me, and they would look at me and they would call me Reverend. Why? They had respect for somebody who was trying to teach them something out of the Word of God. They were a God-fearing group, even though they had committed crimes. And the culture was such where it can maintain itself. But when you stop allowing preachers to teach the things that create that kind of a culture, the culture disappears. And something else takes over. Communism is an example. Nazism is an example. Atheism is an secularism. You know, something will fill the void of truth. And that's the problem that nations have. God says, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? He says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to every people. All right, and I don't mean to belabor that point, but the point is, there is a lot of room here for understanding the importance of Christian morality. And if we allow the secularists to tell us we've got to get back in the corner and shut up, I tell them, shut up. I'm not interested because my convictions are strong and what I see is real. And you are telling me and people like me to just keep my mouth closed because you don't like it. Well, then go somewhere else. I don't need you to be confronting me with your secularism. I know what I believe and why, and I know the good that comes from it. So the point is, we can respect one another, we can enjoy our presence, we can actually tolerate even differences in how we see God. But we have to understand there are certain values that we have to adhere to. Part of them come from the Ten Commandments. All right, now, let's assume that issues like the common car are part of the problem. Let's go one step further. I want to address some ways that the Countermand Amendment, or some issues that the Countermand Amendment can actually remedy. Remember, for the people in the audience, we are advancing an Article 5 amendment to the U.S. Constitution through state legislatures, bypassing Congress, bypassing the courts, and bypassing executive branch. We're doing this by securing 34 applications on Congress for the Countermand Amendment Convention. When this is ratified, we then will see 30 states being able to countermand and rescind burdensome laws and regulations that fall on their citizens, their states, and also their businesses. Here are some issues that can be addressed. The states can actually remedy taxation problems. Think about that, folks. You can actually remedy overtaxation with the Countermand Amendment at a federal level. You can actually remedy laws that are criminal laws that are unconstitutional. You can actually remedy violations of our enumerated rights in the Constitution. You can actually select certain laws. The state legislatures would be doing the selecting, but they would have the power to do this, and they would be able to countermand and rescind laws that are taking our unenumerated rights away. Obamacare may be one of them. How about violations of unenumerated rights in the 9th and 10th Amendment? You know, we hear a lot about nullification. As a matter of fact, it's one of the issues that's talked about a lot in the 1800s. The idea that the states have a right in the 10th Amendment to defy federal mandates placed on them. And the truth is, states still have that right. But it doesn't go too far in its present form because the federal government, as a result of the Supremacy Clause, and that Supremacy Clause was decided way back in 1819, and it was in the McCulloch versus Maryland case, and in that case, the Supreme Court assumed to itself the authority to decide issues between the states. That meant the Supreme Court was supreme, not the state legislatures. Now, ask yourself this question. How is it that the state legislatures who created the federal government and who have the sovereignty to create the federal government should now abdicate that authority simply because they created a constitution and with Article 5 retained to themselves the sovereign authority to amend that constitution? How is it that the states have allowed the federal government to go so far as to make them the whipping boys? That's the thing that's wrong with the thinking that we have today. But we can actually address unenumerated rights. Now, instead of just nullification can still be exercised if the states want to pay a price. The Bureau of Land Management in Nevada was recently in a confrontation with the Bundy Ranch people and militia over there, and it almost got into where bullets were flying. But somehow they backed off, and thank God for that. But the point is, that isn't solved. BLM just backed off. Now they can come back in tomorrow.
And they are threatening to, Charles.
You see, there's an example of what I'm trying to say. And the fact is that they could come back in and create the problem all over again at an opportune time that they choose, and Bundy's going to lose. There's nothing to protect Bundy or Nevada from this kind of encroachment on states' rights and citizens' rights. But when you countermand something, and when you have 30 state legislatures countermanding that particular law that gave the BLM the authority to do that, then that law is automatically rescinded. They can't come back in anymore. It's over with. That is now settled.
But Charles, doesn't that take not only men who have been men or women who have been educated, but also those that are not fearful and cowardice, in addition to not being lazy? Because let's face it, the reason the states got in this shape is because they abdicated their power to the federal government through laziness.
Yes, I agree with that, by the way.
Right.
And they actually, I don't know if I would go so far as to say abdicate. They surrendered it. Abdication means you gave it up. It means it's no longer existing. You know, if a king abdicates the throne, he doesn't get it back. But what the states did in this case, under the sovereignty that they have in Article 5, is that they have surrendered it to the federal government in a way where they have allowed the government to tell them who they are. We are trying to tell the state legislatures that that's not who you are. You are the sovereign authoritative body. You're the one that can protect and restore this constitutional republic. And you do have to have the guts, V, as you've just been saying. They have to have some meat, some courage, some conviction. And we're finding some of these men, by the way, and some of these women. There's a wonderful lady out of New Mexico who I admire. And she is doing a wonderful job, just kind of standing out there strong and leading the way in Nevada for the Countermand Amendment. But at any rate, you're right, and that's part of what we're trying to do with citizen initiatives, get the state legislators to understand they can still bring this nation back to where we are a constitutional republic and where the states are respected partners in government rather than addendums to federal mandates. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jose.
I mean, my only issue is I think the states, at this point, I'm wondering, haven't they get so much? I'm thinking just schools. How much they get? Well, no, not schools. Roads, federal funding. Schools, federal funding. All these different things. It seems like the federal government's figured it out. They're like an octopus with tentacles in everything in the states. And I mean, can it possibly go back to the way it was before that, or maybe not quite as bad as it is? I mean, I just see this. Everything is related to federal funding. Everything, they do. They're like, well, they're going to get federal funds for this, and they're going to get, and of course, where's that money coming from? That begs that whole question. But can it ever possibly really be done? I mean, or has the federal government been so effective in getting involved in so many different things?
Both of your statements seem to fit. The fact is the states have been literally nullified from using their sovereign authority because they accepted these handouts from the federal government. But they really aren't handouts. They are really expenses that their citizens pay for, but they do it through the federal treasury. Mm-hmm. So once they get that to their heads, they may just realize, hey, we can do it better as a state rather than being subjects to a federal government. But it goes back to what V just said, and that is education. The legislators need to realize that the issues are far more important than just how much money you get. You have a constitution you're about to lose. You have a constitution that protects the civil liberties of you, your wife, your kids, your future generations, and the people in your state. And if you're going to sit back on your laurels and think that this is some kind of a game that you can just play for the purpose of getting votes, forget it. We're going to lose this constitution. It happened in Germany, remember? Hitler managed to claim the constitutional authority to himself because they were sleeping. It happened in Russia because of food that they needed, the revolution that started as a result of the economy collapsing. And there are just a whole host of examples of where principles that were to protect the people were surrendered because they had some other issues, and the outcome was a disaster for the world. So not that in communist Russia, in Russia rather, before, during the Tsars, that wasn't necessarily the kind of constitution that we had here, but they had a form of government that did allow a certain amount of rights to the people, and they surrendered those rights, and they wouldn't want those improved. So the point is that we have a mess on our hands because the state legislatures haven't seen the importance of their sovereign authority under Article 5.
You're for a short station break, okay? We'll be right back.
Thank you.
This is a station identification moment. You're listening to CPR Worldwide Media, a division of CPR Media Network, coming to you live right across the planet.
My name is Christopher Perkins, Captain, United States Marine Corps. I spent 9 years in the Marines and led a team in Al-Ramadi, Iraq that risked its lives daily. Today, I'm a managing director at Citi, where I oversee a global team that provides safeguards for the $700 trillion derivatives industry.
Veterans, many of them have the right skills to be great bankers. And when they come in, they know how to make decisions, they know how to take risks, they know how to multitask. All of those things make them really great colleagues.
Just like we would go out onto the streets of Iraq, we would do an analysis of what risk we're taking and thinking about ways to mitigate it. It's no different here.
That makes them extremely valuable, and that's why we want them here helping our clients.
This industry requires our clients' trust. It requires a high degree of integrity. And so, just like the Marine Corps, your reputation is what it is, and your word is very important.
It's not about how many miles you can get out of the C-Max hybrid. It's about how much life you can fit into it. The Ford C-Max hybrid, with an EPA estimated range of 540 miles on a tank of gas, and all the room you need to enjoy the trip. Go stretch out. Go further.
The Ouija board has existed for centuries. It is used to communicate with the dead.
If there's a presence here, please make yourself known. This is a joke. Oh my god. It's not even real, okay?
Ouija.
We're saying goodbye!
Rated PG-13.
Come on, Harry! Dumb and Dumber 2 is the #1 movie in America.
Am I right? What?
Seriously, it's #1.
These guys are morons! I like her a lot.
Dumb and Dumber 2, rated PG-13. Now playing.
Read something recently worth thinking about. It's the soldier, not the campus organizer, who's given us freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier, not the reporter, who's given us freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who's given us freedom of speech. It's the soldier who serves under the flag, who defends the protesters' right to burn the flag. Isn't it time now to demonstrate that we support our troops? Were it not for the brave, there'd be no land of the free.
Fred Thompson's message was brought to you by citizensunited.org.
Okay. Are we going?
And we're back.
Welcome, folks, and thank you for staying with us. This is Charles Kacprowicz with the State Legislators Roundtable. We had two delightful guests here just in the first hour, V. Wright and Jose Estevez. They are the co-hosts for the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot show on CPR worldwidemedia.com, and we had a good conversation dealing with some very serious issues, communism and Common Core, and how we can address them with the Countermand Amendment. So we found ourselves in a good discussion, and I'm grateful to the both of them. You should take time. They're on at 7 p.m. Monday through Thursdays, and take time to listen. They have a wonderful program, and they have a lot of insightful information. They prepare well, and they are constitutionalists. They want to find ways to preserve this Constitution. So I commend them to you and pray that you will listen and learn as a result of learn what it is that they are doing, and as a result help yourself understand the issues better. And you won't get that information either from the media. Okay, I would like to share a little bit now about the Countermand Amendment. We have a big task in front of us, but we've had some good successes. And I would like to first ask if, Sandy, do you have something you would like to add before I take on some of this show tonight?
No, I'm cool right now. I enjoyed getting to know the two of them, Jose and B, a lot better. And it sounds like they really are trying to put out a good show.
They are. They're good people. They really are. Okay, Sandy, how about you, Mike? What would you like to add before I come back into this?
Not really much. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I would like to remind us a little bit of why the Countermand Amendment is so important. It's not just an amendment. It's not just a way that we can somehow feel good about ourselves that we're doing something that makes sense. It's a way to restore our Constitution and our Republic, and to do it peacefully and quickly and also very successfully. But securing the ratification for the amendment is just the first step. Then afterwards, there will be a great number of countermand initiatives that will be created primarily through the National Strategy Committee, which is going to, and already is, composed of many state legislators, many citizens, and a steering committee. And on that committee, the members will begin to examine issues in their states that need to be remedied. And they will then not only select the ones collectively that they want to address, but then they will decide which ones should be countermanded. Citizen initiatives will have the special responsibility as facilitators to work in the state legislatures with the work that we do with legislators, and secure the countermands for that particular law or regulatory ruling that is going to be countermanded. And by doing that, when we get to 30, then that particular law or ruling is rescinded. It's no longer a valid law that needs to be obeyed by the states. So we are looking to move the citizen initiative, the countermand initiatives forward over many years into the future. Right now we have, I estimated, a quick estimate, that we probably have 5 million laws on the books in America, between local, city, state, and federal laws. 5 million. Now, many of them are duplicated, there's no question. But the fact remains, that's a lot of laws. I wouldn't know how to even count them. The SEC regulations, there are enormous numbers of laws with that. The Department of Justice and the IRS, they have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of laws that we're supposed to be obeying. And it's gotten to the point now, instead of having our liberty in law, we have become slaves to law. And that is how the federal government has gotten so powerful. They just pile one law on top of another law, one regulation by the EPA or the BLM or the IRS or someone else. They just keep piling it on and piling it on. And they may think they're doing right, but the outcome is every law cheats you a little bit more of the liberty that you were once guaranteed in the Constitution. It actually enslaves you. It tightens the noose around your neck a little bit tighter. Every new law that's placed on the books. And so they have to be countermanded. They have to be rescinded. Those laws that are particularly burdensome to the states. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to rescind thou shalt not kill. That's not what I'm talking about. But we surely can rescind laws that give the federal government the authority to control and own 88% of the land in Nevada. Don't you think that that's unreasonable? Especially when our Constitution really gives to the federal government maybe 2% of these state lands for their purposes, which is for forts and facilities and naval facilities and so forth. So the selection of laws are very important. At the same time, the state legislatures alone have this authority. Not me, not citizen initiatives, not some group that we are creating, but state legislatures alone have this authority. And Kelly, explain that comment, please. I'm not sure I understand. But the fact is that we are now looking at the Countermand initiative starting sometime in 2016. Now, how are we going to get there? We will first secure the necessary applications on Congress for the Countermand Amendment Convention under Article 5. We need 34. Right now we have 15 sponsored states. Out of that, we hope to have, we hope to reach 20 in about 30 days. But we need a total of 34 states that will actually adopt the resolution that we have, the application on Congress. In that application, we are telling Congress, that is the state legislatures are telling Congress, if you play hanky-panky with this, if you try to play politics and put this thing off, that is the applications after the 34th application has been received, if you put the convening of the convention off that you are being directed to convene, we then will convene it after 60 days ourselves. Why? Because the state legislatures would have met their constitutional requirements, and as a result, Congress will have negated or neglected theirs, and as a result, the states will have the authority to say, we, under Article 5, must convene this convention. And then within 60 days, if it's not convened by the federal government, the states are telling the federal Congress that they will convene it. That's the first step. The second step is to secure from the state legislatures 26 or more delegate resolutions. Now, there's a great big confusion on what a delegate is. Up until we came into the picture, delegates were looked at as equivalent to the founders by every other Article 5 group and by every other group that hates Article 5. Delegates were looked at as having authority to create a new constitution. And so as a result, they place in the delegates tremendous authority for deciding important issues, such as what should be decided are the issues that need to be addressed. How do we address them? What type of an amendment should we have? How do we write the amendment? So now with the logic that comes from the other side, not us, but from the other side, and with the idea that delegates are equivalent to the founders, they conclude that the delegates can actually conduct a constitutional convention for the purpose of changing the entire Constitution. Well, that's nonsense. What has happened is that Article 5 has been twisted, and these other groups will not acknowledge the simple fact that Article 5 clearly says that the states can propose amendments at a convention. That is, they propose the amendment. They're not there to create a new constitution. And many have heard me say this a number of times before. If the states want to create a new constitution, in my understanding of what Article 5 does, they could not do it under Article 5. They would have to secede from the Union. They would have to convene a different convention. They would have to create a new document, constitutional document, and then they would have to form a new government. Then they can do what they want. But believe me, that means bloodshed. Now we're going to have trouble if they start that. But at the same time, they don't have to, because Article 5 gives the states the option to amend the Constitution safely to address many of the ills that the federal government has forced on it. So the Delegate Resolution does a number of important things that are needed to control and bind the delegates that each state sends to the convention. The Delegate Resolution is a contract between the delegates that the legislatures send to the convention and that legislature itself. And so it is not a contract between states. Article 1, Section 4 says you can't have interstate compacts or agreements unless Congress approves. Well, we don't want Congress's approval. We don't need Congress under Article 5. The state legislatures don't need Congress. They don't need the Supreme Court. As a matter of fact, when they decide what the amendment is, that becomes the law of the land that the Supreme Court and Congress has to follow. So the state legislatures create the government and amend the government's activities under Article 5. That's why the founders gave it to them. It was a stroke of genius on the part of the founders when they put Article 5 into that Constitution. And the purpose was so that the states would retain sovereignty. It wasn't for the purpose of the states that just being arbitrary. They had a specific purpose, and that purpose was to retain a sovereign status in a republic under a federal system. That was the ultimate understanding that the state legislatures had. And how did they retain that sovereignty? They passed it down to future generations of legislatures in Article 5. And instead of requiring under the Articles of Confederation a unanimous consent in order to amend the Articles, they decided that it would only require 3/4 of the states to ratify. Well, that left a lot of latitude. It allowed the states now to conduct things so that one state couldn't hold the others hostage, as it happened with Rhode Island during the Constitutional Convention. And as a result, the country almost lost the Revolutionary War as well as the peace after the war. But with 3/4 of the states required, you have some latitude here. You have some maneuvering. You have ability to compromise. And so maybe 12 states today don't want to ratify it. Well, 38 states could still ratify it. That's why it's so important. Now, the Delegate Resolution is the instrument to help control the conduct of delegates at the convention. If you get 26 or more delegate resolutions, then those delegates are bound to the instructions given to them by their legislatures. And because 26 is important, the reason why 26 is important is because we have 50 states. That means that 51% of the states would be able to control the direction of the convention. That delegate resolution would decide some tremendously important issues. One would be, will it be a convention that will have a vote based on the population of the states? And that would take into account states like New York and California and other larger states where they have, in California's case, I think it's 55 delegates that would possibly be sent to a convention, but Wyoming would have only one. And so when you look at that, who's going to win that battle? And then the question would be, are we really a Republican form of government? Or are we going to allow an unfettered democracy to control the states as to what direction they're going to go in, so the identity of the states would be lost? Well, that was the first issue at the Constitutional Convention, and that was settled with this delegate by the name of George Wythe and his committee, and they said, no, we want the convention to be a Republican form of convention with one vote per one state. Well, our delegate resolution establishes that for the Article 5 convention as well, for the Countermand Amendment Convention. So the first rule is to have a Republican form of convention so every state gets one vote, not by population. The second thing is it has to be a majority vote. Now, why is that? Because you still have majority of the states that will rule, not 60%, not 30%. You have 51% so that the convention, with the states having already deliberated in their chambers prior to the convention, what the text of the amendment is, in our case, the Countermand Amendment, which has already been written and approved by many legislators across the country. But the fact is, having already done that as the deliberative body and having the sovereign authority to do that under Article 5, there's no issue with the delegates at the convention. They don't have to decide how to write the convention. I mean, the amendment. And so now you have a convention that is going to be quick, maybe only 7 days, because it's all been outlined for the delegates to conduct the affairs quickly. So we think that we can secure these 34 applications by next year. We think that that we have the good possibility of having the convention convened in sometime in either early 2016 or maybe even toward the middle of the year. But if it's a short convention with only 7 days or thereabout, all of a sudden we could have countermand initiatives started by the state legislatures in 2016. We could actually be pulling government back in 2016 safely. Now, the amendment itself will allow the state legislatures to, once countermanding the law or ruling of the federal government that is burdensome to them, the fact is that it will allow the state legislatures to rescind onerous or burdensome laws with only 30 countermands. That's going to be powerful, not 51%, which would make it kind of like an unwieldy oligarchy of states, but with a 60% margin, there is at least a sense of legitimacy about a great number of states that want that particular law rescinded. And so with that, you have 30 states making that decision. Well, that can start in 2016. This is a fantastic opportunity for the state legislatures to really begin turning this nation around. Now, is Mike still on the line, Kelly?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Mike, am I reading something here? You had something to add to this?
Yeah, about 10 minutes ago.
Okay, well, no, be kind now.
You were on a roll. You were talking about, back then you were talking about the 50,000 or 500,000 or whatever it was, regulations that are out there.
5 million.
The problem is that there's a lot of people in Congress in themselves and the president and the bureaucrats and the judiciary. They have completely lost track that Congress makes laws, that the regulations that come out of those laws, like the Equal Rights Protection Act, like the gun control measures that have fueled a multitude of regulations unfettered by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. All those are regulations, but they have the force of law. The reason I'm hitting on that so hard is that I believe that with this Countermand Amendment, once it is ratified, and I do strongly believe it will be ratified, that when the states start countermanding these regulations, and I would hope that that's one of the things the states really go after the hardest, because that's the ones that need it the worst, that we start countermanding these regulations. And that is, I think, is going to send a very clear message to the Congress to relook at the Constitution as far as Article 1, Section 8 and Section 1, and that then they will start saying, okay, we're going to make law. We are going to have more control on these bureaucratic agencies and cabinets, and they are not going to be allowed to write the many tens of thousands of regulations just because we come up with a law. And I think every time that they come up with a law that the bureaucrats turn around and make, a million regulations out of, then the states need to come down on them like a ton of bricks. The 30 states can stop this, and we can change. I think we can change the complexion of the Congress, and I think we can return the Congress back to what they were supposed to be doing in the first place. So that's what I wanted to say about that.
Well, and to add to what you're saying, there's a call out there to rescind the 17th Amendment. And for those out in the audience that may not understand the 17th Amendment, what happened was the Constitution was amended so that instead of the senators in Congress being appointed by their legislatures, it became a popular vote in the states for 2 elected senators to go to Congress. And that problem meant that politics controlled everything. And as a result, when they went to Congress, they weren't answerable to the legislatures. They were answerable to a body of voters that may or may not understand why it was through state legislatures originally. And of course, we've got people in the Senate right now that have been there for 30 some years. And that's simply because the problem that the 17th Amendment created became an ongoing problem for the country in the state legislatures. And as Mike had been trying to address here, the Countermand Amendment will remedy that. Because now the state legislatures can get back to control over Congress, not just the Senate, but also the House, by saying, hey, if you are doing something that's burdensome, that is unacceptable, and you're not treating us as partners in government, then we're going to countermand it. Now, don't you think that the Senate and the House will think twice before they throw something down the throat of the states? They're going to sit back and say, how do we write this law or this regulation so it's amenable to the states? That's what they're going to say. And they're going to say the reason we need to do that is because if we don't, it'll be rescinded with 30 states. So this amendment has the power of giving the Congress, the forcing on Congress the requirement to perform its duties better, because they will not be able to just make laws and rulings that will control the direction of our country and Constitution without the consent of 30 states or 60% of the states. And by the way, that kind of reasoning also applies to the executive branch. The president will not be able to do things, including this executive order that legalized 5 million illegal immigrants. He won't be able to do that. And if he does do it, the states can rescind it with 30 states. So it's a powerful tool for forcing the federal government to be responsible and to stop playing politics with everything for the purpose of getting votes. Now, I think that we're getting down to a break now, folks, and I'm going to have to turn this over to our producer. You can learn more about the Countermand Amendment by going to countermands.us. You can also tune in on this station, cprworldwidemedia.com/live-radio. Our station is on every Tuesday night at 9 o'clock, and on our show, I should say, and also on Friday at 8 o'clock. And we're going to have to take a short break now for station identification and to hear from our CPR sponsors. We'll be back shortly. Please stay with us, and there's much more to come. Thank you.
This is a station identification moment. You're listening to CPR Worldwide Media, a division of CPR Media Network, coming to you live right across the planet. Check out our website at www.cprworldwidemedia.com and our Facebook page at facebook.com/CPR Worldwide Media. This is CPR Media Network, coming to you live from the USA.
Well, looky here, a new listener. Hey, this ain't your little sister's radio station.
Why do cities shine so bright? It's the glow of opportunities, of ideas bouncing off one another, of countless people, every one of us, striving to succeed. Right now, in cities everywhere, ideas are being born. New thinking that will put us in awe of what people are capable of. That's what lights cities up. And helping people and their ideas to burn even brighter, so that communities, businesses, and you and I can grow. What if a bank made that its job? For more than 200 years, Citi's job has been to help empower people and business. Now, around the world, it's wherever people gather, wherever ideas come alive. It's wherever you are. The world's city.
The design of the Ford Escape is clearly intended to grab your eye. Oh, and your foot. Huh, ain't that a kick? The Ford Escape with the foot-activated liftgate. Go open up something interesting. Go further.
The Ouija board has existed for centuries. It is used to communicate with the dead.
If there's a presence here, please make yourself known. This is a joke. Oh my god. It's not even real, okay?
Ouija.
We're saying goodbye!
Rated PG-13.
Come on, Harry! Dumb and Dumber 2 is the #1 movie in America.
Am I right? What?
Seriously, it's #1.
These guys are morons! I like her a lot.
Dumb and Dumber 2, rated PG-13. Now playing.
Read something recently worth thinking about. It's the soldier, not the campus organizer, who's given us freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier, not the reporter, who's given us freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who's given us freedom of speech. It's the soldier who serves under the flag, who defends the protesters' right to burn the flag. Isn't it time now to demonstrate that we support our troops? Were it not for the brave, there'd be no land of the free.
Fred Thompson's message was brought to you by citizensunited.org.
Welcome back, folks. Again, this is the State Legislators Roundtable. My name is Charles Kacprowicz. I am the Executive Director of Citizen Initiatives and the Countermand Amendment. We are having a discussion of issues in the states and how the Countermand Amendment might remedy them. We're also trying to explain in some detail how the Article 5 process works and why the Countermand Amendment is a near perfect fit for how the states can use their sovereign authority in Article 5 safely, quickly, and successfully. Now, next week on Friday, let me rephrase myself, I'll correct myself, on December 5th, this Friday, at 8 p.m. at cprworldwidemedia.com/live-radio, we will have two special guests from Georgia, Senator Bill Cowsert and also Senator Josh McCoon. These are men who are concerned about issues in their states as they relate to the federal government. I am looking forward to a very serious discussion with them and to give them a chance to air ideas that they have some concern with. Both of these gentlemen are attorneys and they are interested in finding solutions that will help their citizens in the state of Georgia and also, by extension, other states as well. So we are looking forward to that. Now, Mike, did you want to add anything to this before we go on?
Yeah, just real quick. I was just typing it out. Matter of fact, one of the biggest problems we're seeing though, and I can relate this to Alaska. What's going on right now? We got a new governor up here named Bill Walker, and he is taking on 40,000 new Medicaid people here in the state of Alaska under this under Obamacare and the Medicaid extension, which is going to basically bankrupt the state in the next 3 to 5 years. I think one of the biggest things that we are going to have a battle on, even with the Countermand Amendment, even with the states seeing the value of this Countermand Amendment, is that the states have been suckling on this government for so long with Medicaid, with Medicare, with welfare, with EBT, all those things, and this is going to be something that's going to be this is going to be a real battle, and until we can change the mindset of even our state legislators, and that is going to have to be lead by example. We can get 30 states to do this regulation, 30 states to get rid of that law, get 30 states to get rid of that land overreach, get right on down the line. That's what it's going to take, because there's going to be a lot of a lot of people are going to be crying that it's going to be impacting their welfare state, their entitlements, and that is going to be a big issue. And I think it's something that we have to be keeping our eyes on the horizon on too, because it's not something that's going to go away, and it's got to change. We got to change the culture of not only the American people, but we really need to change the culture of the state legislatures taking all that federal funds and be saying no more.
I think we have a very natural and perfect solution, Mike, and I believe that up until tonight we haven't addressed it. There are 38 energy producing states. Now, in North Dakota, where they've had the good fortune of finding ways to develop and produce energy, oil especially. As a result, their unemployment rate is almost zero. Their revenue stream is extremely strong. As a matter of fact, they're one of the more successful economies in the States right now. Now, why is that? Because energy was the source of revenue for them that up until now, Saudi Arabia had, or some of the other, Venezuela, all of whom are not friends in a very positive way with America. And so now if we can get domestic energy developed by the major energy companies, what is going to happen is a source of revenue is going to develop. And all we will need is 30 states to do that. And there are 38 states out there that are energy producing states: coal, oil, gas. There are a number of different nuclear and so forth. The point is that these are traditional energies that really keep this nation going, and we don't even use half of our energy. We have a source of oil and gas and coal that can go hundreds of years, I think almost unlimited. But the fact is that when those deposits of energy are properly excavated and developed and marketed, we can become a major exporter to the nations of the world. There was a recent decision by Saudi Arabia just last week, and Saudi Arabia decided that they were going to glut the oil market. They were going to throw a low barrel price on oil in order to put all of the other states or nations that are producing oil into a state of panic. Venezuela is struggling. Their whole economy depends on oil. Iran is struggling because not only is there a boycott against them, they need the oil revenue, and a lot of other states do. And so Saudi Arabia is anticipating that by doing that, they will disrupt the market sufficiently so that they will be able to bring the oil prices back up. Now, I want you to know that it doesn't cost them to sell a barrel of oil for $100 doesn't cost them $60 to produce. I mean, they can probably produce this oil for $20, $25. And so what they have done is they have artificially inflated the cost and the selling price so that we wind up spending trillions of dollars over the last 40, 50 years that we didn't have to spend, but our politicians wouldn't recognize.
It's worse than that.
Please explain.
This just came out within the last week in relation to what we were just talking about. One of the major purposes for Saudi Arabia and the OPEC to be doing what they're doing right now is to break the back of fracking here in the United States.
Yes, I heard that.
They're wanting to make it so that the cost per barrel is going to be so low that it's going to cost more to take it out of the ground than it does to sell it. And the same thing is happening here in Alaska. We something like 90% of our revenue comes from oil, and our legislature looks at the ends when they do the budget. It's directly tied to the oil industry. And last year they were doing their budget based on $110 a barrel. Well, now all of a sudden it's down into the $80 a barrel, and that has actually just plummeted our economy into a spiral. And from a budgetary standpoint, it's going to really creating real havoc. So the Saudis are doing something really smart from their standpoint, but it's having a huge impact here. And if we weren't so tied into OPEC over these last 20, 30 years, 40 years, a lot of these problems would not have been happening. And if Anwar was open right now, which it could have been open 20 years ago with a full pipeline still going, we wouldn't be worried about Saudi Arabia right now.
Well, you're absolutely right. However, I want to add something to what you said. Domestic energy to us means more than just cheap energy. It means that we won't depend on anyone else for our energy, that they will depend on us. That puts us in a whole different light. Two, it opens up international markets that we can't dream of right now because our prices, we can't produce it, and we are forced to do fracking. Now, the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that once we are allowed to produce energy in a free market economy, our economy grows. You know, Reagan once had a big battle with Congress over reducing taxes. And they said, no, we need the revenue, we need the revenue. And he says, no, you won't. You'll have the revenue by reducing taxes because you'll stimulate the economy. And he was right. And the revenue stream to the federal government and his administration dramatically increased. Well, you see, that's the same thing that's going to happen once we start producing energy. Alaska's revenue stream is going to be dramatically increased. There'll be more markets to sell energy to. And at a price that will actually allow you to reduce the cost because you're getting a bigger share of other markets. And the same will, go ahead.
And the other thing, too, is from a countermand standpoint, is that if we can countermand, if we can get 30 states to countermand a lot of these EPA rules and regulations, if we could get rid of a lot of these things that have really caused a hardship on industry that's been wanting to do a great job of maintaining, a safe work environment, safe drill sites. We do that. I'll relate when I was up at Pool 6, one of my very first rigs I was up on the Alpine up on the North Slope. At the time, it was $14 a barrel was what the cost of oil was. When just to do that exploration to get 1 barrel of oil out of that drill site was $14 a barrel. Why was that? Because over something like 50% of that was because of the EPA rules and regulations that were costing that rig that $14. If you knocked out all those outrageous rules and regulations that made it, if you're walking on the pad and slip and fall with a cup of coffee in your hand, it was a reportable spill. No joke, it's the truth. If they had knocked that out, they could have been producing oil. It would have cost them $9 a barrel to get that out, and they would have had a profit margin for the rest of that 14. So that's kind of where this countermeasure really works with this.
You're right, and the countermeasure can be a powerful tool, not just for the oil industry or the energy industry. Okay, they've got an interest in this. I'm concerned not about them, I'm concerned about the citizenry in the United States having good paying jobs, having a way to actually grow the economy so we get out of the pauper status. The fact is that in the oil and gas industry, the average wage is about $83,000 a year, the average wage. And the left and the EPA and the environmentalists, they've been throwing that income for millions of Americans away for the last 30 years. Now, I want to add something to what you said, if it can come back to me. Oh, the profit margins. We have a misunderstanding about corporate profits. And I don't mean you and I mean in general in the economy, because the left goes crazy with how they explain everything to where they use fiction rather than facts. But you see, if I made a $100 profit today, whatever the product is that I would sell, and I had, if I had a product that I sold and it was $100, and I had a 10% profit margin, before taxes, that means I would have made $10. On the other hand, if I had a $50 profit, and I would still make 10%, that would be $5. But I would have had the ability to increase my markets because my price would be lower. There is such a thing as supply and demand. Free markets allow prices to be established based on perception, based on needs. And so when we look at the percentage, no matter what the price is of oil, you go to the gas pump right now, and you might pay, out here it's about $2.60. It's dropped from almost $4 a couple years ago, and that's because of this world market problem that we have. But at the same time, the oil industry still makes 10%. Doesn't matter the price. Yeah, they made more dollars at $4, but they still made 10%. And when they do their books, they look at percentages. They don't look at the dollars directly. And when people criticize them, they criticize them not understanding that they have to operate on margins of profits that comfortable for them. Grocery stores might operate on 3 or 4%, but they turn their money over 52 times a year, you see. So you have a whole different logic that goes with that industry. But my point is, by reducing the price, the percentage for the oil producers stays the same, but at the same time, the markets grow, not just the oil and energy sector, but other industries grow because there's more revenue coming into the markets. That's what Reagan was trying to explain. And he proved that, in fact, that's how it works. So the people who are in the service industries, they will have a flood of money going into those industries that will allow them to have their companies grow. There will be people in the health industries, in the technology industries, in the automobile industries. There's a whole host of different company types that will benefit from the energy industry. And that's this multiplication effect is what makes the economy through domestic energy so terribly valuable. And we've got to see that, yes.
And just on talking the service on the trickle down economics is which Reagan was absolutely right on. Here in Alaska right now, I can say this, that because of what is going on up here right now with the oil industry expanding, because of Governor Parnell's leadership, we have every business that does service connected industry, the guys that build the buildings, the guys that build the shops that go up to the North Slope, the number of people all the medical, the dental, the paramedics going up on the slope, all that is just increasing exponentially, and that is bringing much needed jobs to Alaska. Our unemployment rate is falling because of it, and we have right now up at Point Thompson, which is a relatively new oil field right next to Anwar. We have over 1,000 people working now, where we had, I think, about 50 about 2 years ago. So it's really, really, it is having a direct impact on everything, from the people that work, the cooks at the rigs, to the housekeepers on the rigs, to the paramedics, to the guys that sling the chains on the rigs, everything right on down the line, and all the support is just having a huge impact on our unemployment and people getting out. And you're right. The average price, the average annual income for an oil field worker here is anywhere from $80,000 to about $125,000 a year, and $80,000 is pretty much start pay. So it's big.
There is yes, and all of that just confirms the idea that free markets work, and supply and demand are the measuring units, methods that are used to determine price and need and availability of cash and monetary expansion. But there's one other factor that needs to be thrown into this equation from the standpoint of the states. You see, West Virginia right now struggles like crazy because the coal industry has been knocked out. And the left has been trying to destroy the coal industry for 30 years. And they're trying to do that to the other industries too, because they think windmills on the top of our cars are what we need to propel our automobiles down the street. But at the same time, the traditional energy area is being looked at as a great enemy. Well, if in fact the coal industry had the ability to rescind laws through 30 states that are keeping them from producing coal, there would be tens of thousands of workers in West Virginia alone who would be earning a good wage. Now, on top of that, whatever economic benefit there is to that state, it's going to have an overflow effect to Pennsylvania, to Virginia, to Tennessee, to Kentucky, to Ohio, to India. It's going to have an effect because it has an economic growth factor that affects the other states as well. So you've got this multiple benefit that comes when you are not allowing foolish regulations and laws to cripple different parts of our economy, and in this case here, the energy amendment. Now, I must tell you that of all the issues that we talked about this year with state legislators, energy seems to have been the number one issue, and for good reason, because it is the industry that the states are being hurt most severely with. And yet the Countermand Amendment, and folks, please out there, listen in the audience, the Countermand Amendment can stop it. 30 states out of 38 energy-producing states, and who also have a very positive economic impact on other states, 30 states can say to the federal government, to the EPA, the BLM, whoever it is that's regulating their land so that they can't use it properly, we've had enough. Your law is now rescinded. And you respect our ability to conduct ourselves.
And Charles,
it's comfortable for us. Yes, Mike.
And something that the listeners need to understand is, and I'm sure that there's environmentalists that are listening to this broadcast as well, and I'm speaking to you directly. The federal government back in the 60s, early 70s, came up here to Alaska and what we called National Petroleum Reserve. It's up on the North Slope to the west of Prudhoe Bay. And they came in and drilled exploratory wells. Well, they did. They have to do that during the winter when there's snow and ice. When they left with the pipes not properly capped, and we have oil on the tundra We have the pipe sticking out. We have a mess, an absolute mess at NPR that the federal government did. And it's hundreds, not onesie, twosie. It's hundreds of these that have got oil sitting on the tundra that's killing the tundra all around it, or has killed the tundra all around it. And the federal government has refused to come up and fix it. The federal government has refused to allow BP, ConocoPhillips, or ARCO to come in and take over those wells and fix them and correct them and take care of the environmental impact that has been going on. The federal government has done that to us, and the people need to understand that the BP, ARCO, all those oil industry guys up here, they get it. They know how to take care of this land. And the environmentalists and the federal government, the environmentalists who think that the feds are the end all in this, need to look at their history.
All right. Thank you. The point I think we need to. We're almost out of time, folks. We're going to be closing the show in a few moments. We understand the need for doing the best we can to produce clean energy, and we've made remarkable growth in America. We are the standard for the world. Why do we want China to take the coal industry over? And they have polluted cities in China where you can't even see your hand in front of your face. Why would we want that to happen if you're really involved with trying to keep the the environment safe? So we have things that have to be addressed here that are far more important than just whether or not we should be using so-called clean energy. Now, folks, I got to begin to close now. On countermands.us, in the upper right corner, there are some buttons that I'd like you to go to, and you will see my itinerary over the next 4 to 5 months. I am intending to travel to the state capitals around the country, perhaps as many as 45 states over that period of time. I've been asked by many, many legislators to come and visit their state, and we're now making ourselves available this year to help them in getting the Countermand Amendment moving forward in the legislatures. We need you to go there and to see my itinerary. We're going to have special seminars at the capitals. Go there and see the states. If you're in that capital, you're invited to help us to organize that event. There will be a book signing. The committees at the legislature are one thing, but we'll also have special meetings in the Capitol for the purpose of addressing issues that the citizens have, and at the same time to present the Countermand Amendment, the missing piece in the Article 5 puzzle. Now, we are going to go to a close. My custom is to close with a short prayer. As a Christian man, I try to make sure that the Lord is leading the way. And so if you'll bear with me, folks, I'm going to have a short prayer and not only thank the Lord, but ask his guidance. Lord, we come in the name of our Savior, and we say, we thank you for your goodness to us, for the provisions you've made for us, and for the blessings you've given us. Our family members, our income, our food, there's a whole host of things. But we're in the battle, Lord. We're in a terrible battle for the souls and minds of men, as President Reagan said, and I would add one word. We're in the battle for the souls and the minds and the lives of men. And America has been the standard. And if we lose this Constitution, I believe it will be a loss for the whole world, not just us. So we ask you to help us, encourage us, provide for us, touch some people out there, Lord, who want to see this nation return to you. Help, send them ways in which they can help us. There's a button for a donation. You can go there. You can order publisher's pre-publication special for the book that we are autographed copies of the books. You can order that.